This video is a review of Lesson 2 in Chapter 9, dealing with the Arabian Peninsula. The focus of this lesson is the culture and government of the countries who make up the Arabian Peninsula. And really, we will be looking at Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Oman, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, Iraq, and Iran. Most of the people who live on the Arabian Peninsula speak the Arabic language, and their culture is very, very strongly influenced by their religion, and the religion is the main religion of the people who live here is Islam. Now, the Saudis, the people who live in Saudi Arabia, they have separated Islam into two main branches. There is the Shia branch of Islam, or Shia Muslims, and the Sunni branch of Islam. These two branches of Islam that we're going to be focused on, the Shias and the Sunnis, they have some pretty severe differences. Their origins date all the way back to the time of Muhammad in the 600s AD. And it really was about, the division was about who was going to succeed the Prophet Muhammad as the leader of the Muslim nation. The Sunni Muslims, they believed that an elected official could hold that job and could kind of run the government as well as guide Muslims in their religion. Whereas the Shia, or the Shiite Muslims, they believed that the successor to Muhammad should be somebody from the Prophet's own family. That the person must have kind of divine blood in him in order to be able to run that. So they didn't want elected officials. They wanted to appoint a member of Muhammad's family as the leader. And since that time, there have been these two different groups of Muslims who have at times been at odds with one another. Let's go ahead and focus on the differences between these two religions, or these two branches of the Islamic religion. First, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the Shia and look at some of the differences of what they kind of believe as far as religion and government goes. First of all, they believe that the true interpretation of the Islamic teaching can only come from the Imams, okay? And the Imams are those people who claim their descendancy from Muhammad. The Imams should be of Muhammad, the Prophet Muhammad's blood. That's what they believe. They believe that the Imams are sinless by nature and that their authority comes directly from God. Therefore, a lot of times what they do is the Shia Muslims, after these Imams die, they create a monument at their tombstones, and they kind of treat them almost like saints in their religion. They're treated like saints. The Shia believe that they are divinely guided, as I mentioned, that they get their power from God, their successor of Muhammad. And since they are of Muhammad's blood, and Muhammad was guided by God, according to the Muslims, they think that these people would have a strong sense of spiritual authority. So their word is kind of the law when it comes to Islam. As I mentioned before, they believe that only the members of Muhammad's family can be imams, or the successors to Muhammad. Now, when we talk about where do the majority of we will find that the majority of the Shia live in Iran. About 90% of their population. There's roughly around 60 million people that live in Iran, and 54 million of them practice the Shia branch of the Islamic religion. Now let's take a look at the Sunni religion. As I mentioned, at the time of Muhammad's death, there was this controversy over who was going to follow him. Was it going to be a member of his family? Particularly, they were looking at Muhammad's son-in-law, who was also his nephew. Or was it going to be one of his most trusted advisors, a fellow by the name of Abu Bakr? Ultimately, they decided that Abu Bakr was the best person because he had traveled around with Muhammad and was a good friend and a spiritual advisor. So what they believe is that the majority of the community is able to interpret Islamic teachings and present those teachings to the rest of the Muslim community. It doesn't have to be somebody who is related to Muhammad, that anybody can basically read from the Islamic text and help guide people through Islam. They focus mainly, they follow the Sunnah. The Sunnah is one of the two religious holy texts that the Muslims use, along with the Quran. And the Sunnah is basically Muhammad's followers wrote down the words and the deeds, how Muhammad behaved, how he lived. And that's the information that you would find in the Sunnah. So Sunni Muslims, they would follow Muhammad's guidance or his example that he has left for them on how to live their life. And that involves the 5 pillars and the other things that we talked about whenever we learned about the Islamic faith. They emphasize, Muslims emphasize that Muhammad's teachings teaches that everybody can have the same relationship with God. That's the next one down here. Every individual can have a direct relationship with God. It doesn't just have to be somebody who is of divine blood or is a family member of Muhammad. The majority of the Muslims that live throughout the world are Sunni Muslims. About 85% of the world's population of Muslims are Sunni Muslims. Now, as we move forward and prepare for our Chapter 9 exam, you are going to need to know the differences between the Shia and the Sunni, the main differences, how these two groups of Muslims started, and how their beliefs are different. So you want to make sure that your notes reflect those ideas that we just talked about in the video and that we've already discussed in class. The religion of Islam influences Saudi Arabia's cultures in many, many ways, mostly because it has a lot of strict requirements, like a lot of other religions do. The Quran and the Sunnah, the two main holy books, they cover everything from diet to marriage, divorce, business contracts, and even the proper way to clean that one should clean their teeth. There are certain foods that Muslims are forbidden to eat. They're not allowed to eat pork, and you wouldn't believe the number of products that have pork in them. For example, did you know that Mountain Dew has pork in it? It's in the green coloring that makes Mountain Dew the fluorescent color that it is. Doritos, oh man, I love Doritos. They have pork in it, so Muslims aren't allowed to eat that food. Muslims aren't allowed to drink alcohol. They're not allowed to gamble. Islam requires modesty. So you'll often see in a country that has, that the main religion is Islam, part of their culture is they keep their arms, their legs are often covered. Sometimes men wear cotton headdresses that are held in place by a cord. Women at times might wear a black cloak and a veil in public, depending on which group of Muslims that they belong to. Saudi customs and laws limit women's activities. We've heard just recently through the current events videos we talked about in Pakistan, the young girl who was attacked on her way to school because she was going to school. In some very fundamental Islamic groups, they believe that women shouldn't be allowed to go to school. So a lot of times they can be very oppressive, However, as we've moved into the current times, into modern times, Islam has been much less oppressive with their local traditions. This will end segment 1 of our Lesson 2 review. There'll be you can watch segment 2, which will talk about each of the individual countries there on the Arabian Peninsula that make up the Middle East, and it'll focus more on their government and economy.